Well, Dipti, hello again, and welcome back to the second video where we're going to talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey into food. That's quite a jump from where we were before, where you obviously had a real interest, you had some skills, you had some alternatives for your life in terms of your sporting ambitions, your engineering ambitions, just your ambitions generally in business, and you'd had all the academic qualifications. So. It's quite a big jump to start thinking about the entrepreneurial options, especially in food. So, can you start talking to us a little bit about where that came from?
Absolutely, Ray. Um, so actually, if I really think about it, it was more accidental. My entire journey into food and actually wanting to be a foodpreneur was kind of accidental. I think uh, I would tie it down to like a conversation with one of my friends. We were attending a wedding, and like we were at that age that most of our friends were getting married and on that time. So, like I was constantly in and out of weddings, and Indian weddings are large. We tend to invite a lot of people. It goes on for like a couple of days, maybe even 3 to 4 days, and it's like you're eating all the meals together. It starts at breakfast, it goes on to lunch, high tea, dinner. And so I remember having a conversation with my friend about how um, the wedding market and catering, the wedding food market in general has flavors lacking. Uh, because when you go and eat in a restaurant or you eat some authentic food in from that a chef makes, there's a lot of soul and a lot of flavor in the food. Uh, but wedding food in general was in India was tending to not be as fresh, and it was lacking a lot of authentic flavors. And so we got talking, and we were discussing about how, like, why do people not just call restaurants that they are fond of, but perhaps why don't they like get chefs to come on board to cook food at these weddings? Food that's authentic, that has freshness, that speaks to the guests. Because so that's where actually that's where the thought started from. I didn't know I'd reached this far.
Right.
And this was the same time that I had taken a back seat, and I was rethinking as to what I wanted to do career wise. And I started thinking about tying up with brands and chefs to work with them at events.
Right.
Because what happens is that when you kind of a chef has to come and produce something on in a party banquet, or let's say like in a party environment, they don't have their kitchen to work with. So
Right.
it becomes very difficult for them, and they weren't very open at that time. But that was something that started sounding very interesting to me. And I was like, like why don't I try to talk to some brands and some chefs that I know and see if they'd be interested in doing this. And that's where the journey actually started.
And was this specifically for weddings where you saw there was a gap, there was a need because they weren't doing it properly as far as you were concerned?
Absolutely. So this was in terms of weddings, parties, single events. Um,
Well,
because there are several celebrations that people have, and I felt like there was a big gap between what we eat at a restaurant versus the kind of food that is delivered at an event.
but were these weddings sometimes held in places like hotels where they had their own chef and they had their own kitchen facilities? So,
Absolutely.
weren't you fighting a little bit of a battle there?
Absolutely. It's a big battle. It's a battle even now. But I think hotels have started realizing that um, so their banqueting team is usually different than what their restaurant team is. And they don't necessarily have the specialty to curate different cuisines, but they are forced to by guests because like the wedding is going on for like a couple of days, and there's multiple meals, and nobody wants to repeat flavors. So
Right.
so it was a struggle, but I think the management started realizing that it kind of adds a feather to their cap if they allow specialty counters along with their own food, and there's lesser pressure on their staff as well.
You just mentioned a word which I think is probably quite important to you and to your life as a food entrepreneur, flavors. And I remember
Absolutely.
you started talking about that as you were growing up in Calcutta. There's a big change in the flavors you experienced when you went to the States and then to Germany. So is that a really important part of your food entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. Flavors, I think, is one of the key elements of being able to deliver the food right for a given audience. I think it plays a big role in understanding what your guests would enjoy. So if you actually like, when I talk about food, I talk about flavors in terms of what is acceptable to a given audience.
Right.
So if your audience, so the market that I work with, the segment that I work with is the luxury segment, and most of my clients are well traveled, and the guests that they are hosting are well traveled. So when you say that you're giving Italian food, they expect a certain quality in the Italian food.
Right.
When you talk about Japanese food, they know what authentic Japanese food is. So that expectation is always there. So in terms of flavor, like you need to understand the audience that you're dealing with and what's acceptable and appreciable to them.
Incredible task you're taking on when you're looking at international flavors as well. So if you go from Italian to Japanese, that's a pretty big jump. I remember once having our first meal in Tokyo, where just the quality of the service and their approach to actually giving you the food before you even got to the flavors, there was almost a different flavor of service. The ambiance was quite different.
Mhm.
How did you obviously experience some of these differences yourself? How did you go about finding out more about all the different flavors there are in the world? How did you teach yourself?
I think there are too many flavors in the world, and I feel that there's so much more for me to see. I think I've only scratched the surface.
Really?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. Uh, but I think my experience of living in different countries perhaps is somewhere where I picked up different flavors from. And I understood different cuisines from living in different countries, and then, of course, traveling. And as I got more interested in doing this, into getting into food and curating different flavors, I also traveled a lot more to research. So, like I have trip plans where, like, I'd probably like be in, let's say, Dubai, and I have like a list of restaurants and a list of chefs that I want to try flavors of. So I think there's a lot more in terms of flavor that can be done, and every season I kind of try to bring some of it into what we are curating.
And when you visit new places and go to different restaurants, do you always talk to the chef?
Absolutely, absolutely. I Even if it's just to give a good feedback, like
Right.
it's always to me it's so important to understand the person who's behind the scenes, who's cooking the food, because they put their soul into the food. So yes, of course, it's like an important part of eating in the restaurant.
You're probably getting a reputation, you know. It's probably like getting a Michelin star to have you have a chat with the chef and they know you're in the restaurant. So be turning these amazing thoughts about how you could do better and things that were inspiring you into a business is quite a different matter. How did you start? What was the beginning of your entrepreneurship?
So in the beginning, I started with curation, like we spoke a few minutes back, where um I had the idea of tying up with different brands that are well known for certain products, and then tying up with certain chefs whose food I believed in, and like certain restaurants that are popular for certain flavors. So that's where the journey began from. So I tried up with brands like Ladure and Sprungli. Those brands weren't available in India at that time. There were certain master chefs that I tied up with, um, in terms of flavors, to bring in more flavors into the Indian market. So in fact, Ladre was did not have a presence in India, and the first event that they did in India was with me. Um, so that's actually like a part of where the journey began. And apart from just signing up with these brands, I slowly got into menu curation as well.
Right.
So Indian weddings, as you know it, are larger than life, you know, and in a given meal period, you can have anything between three, 3 to 4 cuisines. You can even touch on different cuisines and pockets of flavors. So I got into menu curation where, I would help the client. Uh, I would consult with the client to see what menus they could have to balance out flavors over the 3 meal periods on the days.
To turn all these fantastic ideas into a business still requires you to be quite persuasive. You're having conversations with different people and you're persuading them to get into business with you. When you're just starting, you've got no track record. So how did you find that? Was that something that required an awful lot of confidence? Is that natural confidence? Where did you get that from?
So when I approached brands and chefs, they had their own hesitations because their product is known with a certain quality, and when they reproduce it in any event or a party, they don't want to compromise on the quality of their product, and I didn't want that either. So yes, like when it was more like when they saw the business and the potential of it, they started opening up to wanting to do it. And
Right,
then when a couple of brands came on board, the others wanted to come on board as well. They wanted to see what potential the Indian market had
right.
because because they all understood that these weddings were pretty large and that there's immense amount of potential in the Indian market when it comes to weddings and expenditure at weddings.
Anyone ever say no to you?
I think not a direct no, but they have their apprehensions. Like I said,
Okay,
a lot of chefs have their apprehensions. They have a business that's already running. So for them to want to take on more, like they have to see the potential before that. So I don't think it was ever a no. It was more like, it's very interesting and I want to see like how I can do or get involved in it because I don't have like the kind of manpower to be able to support that operation. So, it was
right.
more like I had to hold their hand and try to like kind of provide them the support they needed locally to be able to deliver what they could.
Okay,
Um, so I don't think it was a no, it was more like, yes, we are interested, but we want to see how we can do it.
okay. That sounds really good. Never got a no to start with. Uh, Being an entrepreneur requires business acumen. You need to get the numbers right. You need to understand the market. You need to know your part in it. You need to know who the competition are. Although maybe there wasn't any competition to do what you were doing. What were your thoughts about that in terms of the business model?
So there were a lot of catering companies that were doing really well in India. They were doing their own food, and there were like, there was kind of like a gap where there was a requirement for more variety of food to come in. Um, like I said, like India was growing in the sense of people were traveling abroad more. They were bringing back experiences with them, which they wanted to reproduce at their events. So I felt like there was a big gap and there was a need for it at that point. And my structure was more based on a consulting structure
Okay,
uh, at that point. I didn't have like a very large facility that I needed to support. So it was
okay,
a very small office. And whatever work I did or whatever, whatever support I had to provide would be on the event site itself.
okay. You know people would enjoy the food much more with your consultation. So that was brilliant. That's a great way to start. And then
Absolutely.
before you actually turn it into an absolute business. Was the money side of it difficult in terms of knowing what to charge? If you were charging a company that was doing it anyway, they were going to have to charge their clients a little bit more, even if they were putting on a better show with better food. Was the money side of it a difficult part of you becoming an entrepreneur, or did that come naturally to you as well?
Yes. I think initially when I was working on this idea, I did approach a lot of event planners, and I tried to understand if there was scope for it. Uh, and they seem to be very interested. And from what I understood is that if you have like a good product to offer, and if you've delivered it well at an event, uh, people are willing to spend the money. I felt that I found that there was enough scope for it. Yes.
Okay. Now, the really important advice you might be able to give now is about tips for other would-be entrepreneurs, people who maybe have an inkling of the kind of inspiration that you did and wanting to turn that into something they could do as a business to become an entrepreneur. Did you come up against difficult problems that you were able to overcome? And could you share what those problems may be with other people who are thinking of going along the same lines?
Absolutely. I think there were a lot of hurdles, I feel, because in a way I switched fields. I was into the engineering field and then I moved into food. And very honestly, I don't have an F&B background. I didn't have a food background. It was more out of passion that I wanted to get into that field. It was more because I had all these creative juices in my head, and I felt like when you're younger, you feel like yes, this is going to work, and I had that belief that this is somehow like it was in my mind that the switch would work. But just convincing people around me, you know, that I want to make this jump from being an engineer to like getting into the food business. I was questioned along the way for sure. I was questioned by my parents. At that point, I was a single mother, so I was questioning myself as well. I was like, oh,
Right.
if this doesn't work out, what am I going to do? What step do I take next? Um, so yes, I think more importantly, when you have an idea you need to think it out in a practical sense, of course, but you also have to believe in your idea. And there are so many instances where you feel like you might not be doing it right, but then you just pause and you kind of restructure yourself and your thoughts instead of um, feeling like this won't work out. Rather, maybe it will work out differently. That's one thing that I've taken away from this
Right.
because businesses are changing very fast, especially like in the food industry. The space changes very fast, trends change fast. So I feel like staying on top of the game by researching, by innovating, by believing in yourself, by also taking feedback and working on it is something that really works for me. At the time when I started, it was actually post the first wave of COVID. Um, and the entire world was kind of closing down and then I decided I want to take on a team and start this because there's the F&B markets were booming. People were really into getting into nitty-gritties of food. Restaurants and cafes were opening up in India. And I felt like that was the right time because I had this idea and I didn't want to shelf it at that point of time. So of course, there was like a lot of crisis management I had to do because any vendor that was working on a given site, there were like several protocols that we had to follow in terms of testings being done, the kind of hygienes that were being followed, and you always had to have like a fallback, like you had to have like a plan B and a plan C
Right.
um, in case someone got sick. So I think there were a lot of challenges, but just also finding just also being able to overcome challenges and
Right.
believing that it's going to work out and not dwelling on something that's not worked out. That is something that an entrepreneur really needs to um, you know have in them. Like you cannot just dwell on something that's going wrong. You need to move on, correct it, and then take action.
But you learn
um,
from it as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's kind of like taking notes for the next time.
So, with budding entrepreneurs who may be watching this video and they're interested in food, I suppose there's always going to be a market for food. That's the one thing, whatever happens in the world, even during COVID, people eat. There weren't
Absolutely.
there weren't big weddings, but there will always be weddings. So, in a sense, you had got that part of the marketing absolutely nailed down. But there's always going to be difficulty in getting into the market. For people who don't have your, how can I put this, obvious brains. You have great academic qualifications. You take a fair, almost an academic approach to what you're doing and how you learn and how to make sure things are going to work. For others, would you advise them to find maybe a business mentor who understood, even if they had a passion for food, would they need maybe someone else to give them a little bit more advice on how to run a business?
Absolutely. I think as an entrepreneur, you're always learning. In my journey, like I feel like I learn something new every day, and it doesn't only come from a mentor. It comes from people around you as well. Because you cannot be an expert in everything. Um, every employee comes with a certain skill set, and it's all teamwork. It's all teamwork.
Right.
There's certain beliefs that I have that are challenged, and like I kind of logically think through it and kind of change it. So I feel like more than only a mentor, you need to be learning from people around you as well.
Okay.
Along my journey, like I've had several mentors, like there's certain people I look up to, so I talk to them about my work, perhaps get ideas of them. There have been so many chefs that I've learned so many things from. There's so many other entrepreneurs that inspire me to do my work better.
Right.
So I think that inspiration comes from everyone, small or big.
So you're learning all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Well, we're coming to the end of this great video, but the advice that you would give to other budding entrepreneurs, is there a market in food for people who have got different ideas, who want to do something which they think there's going to be a demand for? Is there always going to be a market? Do you think it is possible to become an entrepreneur in food today?
Absolutely. I think this is like the food space is just, exploded. There's so much that you can do with food, especially because of technology and the way that it's developing. Um, Not only catering, but I think the QSR format, which is the quick service restaurant format and the cloud kitchen formats,
Right.
those are taken on in a big way. In fact, I'm trying to work on a QSR format as well in the UAE myself currently. So I think there's a lot of scope in the food business, and if you have a product that speaks, if you have an audience for the product that you're doing, you're sure to find business. I in fact recently I met an entrepreneur who's doing a very specific cuisine from India, and her restaurant started doing so well that she got into the catering business herself. So, like just like from doing 10 things in a restaurant to getting into catering is a big jump. So I feel like there's a large scope in the food business, provided you have a great product and you understand that your product speaks to people.
That's absolutely amazing. You obviously have knowledge of where you're going in terms of you may go into different markets around the world, different types of cuisine, different needs. Is that your ambition? Are you going to become truly multinational?
So I think ambition wise, I feel like I want to structure and make my company kind of bigger in a way. Um, I'm constantly working on small improvements in our organization,
Okay,
and I definitely want to have a presence out of India as well. Um, so I actually do not know how far this is going to take me, but I am dreaming big, and I hope I do get there someday.
good. I have to say that you are a true inspiration. And I think if anyone listening to this or watching this video actually comes up with an idea to do something a little bit different, but within food and run a business, I think we would want to follow them. and see how they get on. So anyway, just to finish the video, I'll ask you this difficult question. Your business is obviously going places. Would you swap it for winning an Olympic gold medal in swimming?
That's a very difficult question. Because that would make me the first Olympic swimmer from India to win a medal.
Oh,
Um,
really? Oh, okay.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
that's another
Swimming
one.
hasn't really. I don't
Okay.
know. That's really difficult. I'm not going to answer that one. But
Um,
to actually answer your question, no, I feel like I'm very happy where I am currently. I feel like I've found my space, and there's so much scope to grow in this field that I feel like I would not want to go anywhere else right now.
okay. Oh, I'm glad to hear you say that. Well, Dipti, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. I think you're an incredible person, and what you've developed is incredible. You're just making me hungry listening to you. I want to experience all those wonderful flavors you've been talking about. So, thank you so much, and good luck. We await more news about your successes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray. It was great talking to you.